Welcome back to my booktube channel. If you're here after watching my very first video, then thanks for coming back. If you are new, my name is Lauren and I just love to talk about books. So that's really what this channel is primarily going to be for. And today I'm going to start by talking about my favorite books of 2021. I did finish all my reading for the year, meaning that I hit my annual goal of 50 books, which is the most I've ever read, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. And I think next year I'm going to focus on hitting 52 books, just because it is like a little bit of a jump, but still realistic. And I also have a goal of being much more intentional, I guess, about what I read. I feel like this year was kind of mediocre for my reading. Like, I had some good books. Obviously, I have this stack here that I did really enjoy, but a lot of them I read this year just were kind of average and fell flat for me a little bit. But I do already have a list of books that I'm highly anticipating coming out in 2022 that I genuinely think I'll enjoy. So I'm going to focus on picking out those books, but also leaving a little bit of room for books that I might not typically read. So we'll see what 2022 brings. But for now, I do at least have some books that I really did enjoy this year. I think I'm just going to start by going like chronological order from the books that I read in the beginning of the year, and then just finishing off with actually the last book I read of the year was one of my favorites, so it made the list. But in the beginning of the year, I did think it was going to be a strong reading year because I read my first 5-star book, and that is The Pool of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. And this author also wrote Room, which I think probably more people are familiar with. But this is a story about Julia. She is a brand new nurse just starting her career out in the year 1918 in Dublin. And a pandemic has just recently broken out. It's a flu pandemic, and she's working in the maternity ward. So the whole story really is just following her and her experiences being a nurse, specifically in a maternity ward during a pandemic. Reading it this year, definitely, it's interesting to see the similarities that she faces compared to what we're facing over 100 years later. And it's a very touching story. Not a lot happens, though, I will warn you. It's very character driven, and it's really about the connections that she, our main character, is building with the patients and then the fellow doctors and nurses at the hospital as well. I do think that this could easily be boring for some people. I'm not selling this book very well, but I could definitely see how it could bore people with the medical jargon. It's really taking place in the same setting. You're pretty much in the maternity ward for the entirety of the book. And like I said, not a lot happens, but there's something so touching about this, something so like humane about the connections between the patients and the nurses and doctors. And by the end of the book, you feel like you really know the characters. So I think that's why I enjoyed this book so much. But again, it might not be for everybody. If you've read it though, let me know what you think of it, because I feel like I don't hear people talking about it very often. But definitely a 5-star read for me this year. And then shortly after, I actually read another 5-star read. So I was really pumped about 2021. I was like, this is going to be a great reading year. I'm going to have a ton of 5-star reads. Didn't really turn out that way, but I did absolutely love this book, and it is The Push by Audrain. This is classified as a thriller. I guess it has some thriller elements, but I kind of feel like it's more just fiction. It is a bit dark, so dark fiction, can we make that a genre? I don't know. But it's following the main character, Blythe, and she gives birth to a baby girl, and she is feeling like she's not connecting very well with the baby. And she's starting to wonder, was I just not made for motherhood? Is it something specifically with this baby? Is it me? Like, what's going on that I'm not feeling connected to my own child? So as the reader, you start to wonder, is it the child or is it Blythe? And later on, she does have another child and she absolutely adores him. So that really raises the question now of, why didn't she connect with the first one? And is there something more sinister about the first child? So it is definitely interesting. It has some very dark aspects. I also would check out the trigger warnings if you're dealing with any kind of child loss, whether it's a miscarriage or death of a child. I definitely would, look up the trigger warnings. This might not be the best pick for you at the moment, but it did keep me hooked. I loved the characters, even if they weren't likable. I definitely got connected to them. And this also, I will say, is one of those books where like the last line when you read it just like pulls it all together. Ugh, I love that in a book, and this definitely gives you that. So definitely recommend, absolutely adored it. And then I hit a wall where I didn't really have any books that I absolutely loved. I read some okay books until fall time when I picked up my first Fredrik Backman, which is Anxious People. And if you've never read anything by Fredrik Backman, you should, because his writing is so quirky, it's so fun, it's so quick to read. And I think the thing that amazed me most about this is while it was so fun and quirky, it also touched base on like a lot of moral themes too. And it had a lot of deeper meaning in it than what I had expected to gain from this. So it's basically a book about a failed bank robbery. A person attempts to rob a bank, they end up fleeing the situation, and then they run into a like apartment viewing, and they hold everybody hostage in the apartment viewing, and you're basically just getting all of the characters' life stories along with the bank robbers' life story and reasoning for why they were trying to rob the bank in the first place. There's a line on the back too that I think sums up the story probably better than I could, but it says, as the minutes tick by, they begin to suspect that the criminal mastermind holding them hostage might be more in need of rescuing than they are. And that's kind of what this story is about. I guess it's about grace and forgiveness, redemption. Very beautiful story, but also a lot of fun to read. So definitely recommend this one. Then I read a Colleen Hoover book, and this is kind of what got me hooked. I will say though, I did read Verity by Colleen Hoover, and that's an honorable mention in this list. I really enjoyed that. I liked the plot twist. I do know that that's definitely different than what she typically writes though. She's typically a romance writer, and that's how I got into the genre. But I picked up Ugly Love, and I fell in love with this one. It is super emotional. What I like about Colleen Hoover though is that she writes romances, but they have a deeper meaning. Like, it's not just lighthearted, fluffy romances. There's depth to this. You're basically following the two characters, Miles and Tate. They meet and have basically an instant attraction to each other, so they agree that they'll just be friends with benefits, and then a love story does ensue from there. But as the reader, you're starting to learn very early on that Miles is very withdrawn. He's not interested in any kind of relationship or falling in love. It actually quite scares him, to be honest. But when you're reading it, you're finding out why Miles is like that. So it does go back in time to some events that happened to Miles, and you learn more about his past and why he's so withdrawn, and that is where the depth really comes in. It's very sad story, very tragic, and just if you're going to read this, have your box of tissues ready, but I definitely recommend it. Sad, but definitely worth it and rewarding at the end. And then last but not least for 2021, I just finished this last night, and it is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Feeney, and in this book you're following two main characters, Adam and Amelia, who they're a married couple that are having some troubles in the relationship. So they go on this weekend to get away to a secluded area in Scotland, and they get the chance to stay in this very old like chapel that hasn't been used for hundreds of years. And basically it's your average thriller in that, you know, secrets come out, there's definitely some mystery elements, there's some very spooky type moments in this story as well. But what I found unique about it was not only are we getting both Adam's viewpoint and then Amelia's viewpoint like every other chapter, but we're also getting a glimpse into their past by reading the letters that the wife wrote to Adam over the course of their 10 years of marriage. So I found that to be very unique. It kept me very engaged, and the plot twist at the end I thought was very, very clever. Definitely love this one. I would recommend this to anybody. It gives me the same kind of vibes as Silent Patient, like not the same plot twist obviously, but if you were surprised by that, I think you would be surprised by this, and I think you'd enjoy this as well. So definitely would pick this up. 5 out of 5 stars for me. And then, like I said, there are a couple books that I don't have the physical copies to. The first being The Acts of Life by Kristen Mulligan. I picked this up on a whim, actually. I saw it on Kindle Unlimited, so I started reading it, got immediately hooked. I didn't even read the synopsis. I hadn't heard anything about it, and I think that's also how you should go into it if you plan on reading it. I keep telling everybody to go into it blindly, but I truly think that that's like the best experience, because you're reading it and you think it's one thing, but really it's like an entirely different story by the end. And that's the most I'll say. So definitely recommend, though, one of my favorites for the year. Last but not least is Kristen Hanna's The Great Alone. And this book, there's many different themes that happen, many different kind of like mini plots throughout the story, I feel like, so I'll keep it short with my summary, but it's basically about a family that moves to Alaska, and like the middle of nowhere, Alaska. They kind of have to learn to how to survive there. But basically it's following a dad that has some PTSD from the Vietnam War. This does take place in the 70s, by the way. The mom that's dealing with some domestic abuse, and then the daughter who is really just trying to cope with both of her parents' problematic areas as a little girl. And that's kind of like the best description, but it is such a beautiful story, very, very atmospheric. I would definitely recommend reading it in like the fall or winter time. But by the end of it, you get so attached to the characters. I definitely cried a couple times throughout it. It's a very emotional story, but again, like Ugly Love, very rewarding. And I recommend that story to basically anybody, because I truly think that there's something in it for everyone. So if you haven't picked that one up, definitely put it on your 2022 TBR. I loved it, and don't be intimidated by the length because it goes super fast. But that is really all. We're at the end of my favorite books. I'm hoping next year that I have a few more favorites. And I do have quite a bit of hope for next year, because I definitely have some that are coming out that I'm really excited about. And I think I'm going to do a video on like the highly anticipated 2022 reads. So I'm excited to share that with you guys one day. And that is a wrap. So I appreciate it if you stuck around until the end of this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.